Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Whisper. Tonight, we step away from the city lights and into the wild silence of the wilderness, into the lonely world of tents, trails and forests that stretch farther than your courage dares to wander. Camping is supposed to bring peace, a fire, a few stars, and the sound of the wind brushing through pine needles. But sometimes the woods are not empty. Sometimes they watch back. The stories you're about to hear are true accounts, told by campers, hikers, and travelers who went looking for stillness, and instead found something waiting for them in the dark. We've gathered these testimonies from across America's most remote wilderness, from forests older than memory itself. Tonight, we'll explore 9 disturbing encounters that prove the wilderness doesn't always let you leave unchanged. Each story a fragment of truth whispered through the trees, and once you hear them, you'll never look at the quiet the same way again. If you crave true, pulse-chilling horror told exactly as it was lived, make sure to subscribe to Shadow Whisper and ring that notification bell so you're the first to know when the dark comes calling again. I never believed that silence could sound alive until that night. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than a quick weekend away. Me, Emily, and our dog Milo. We drove 2 hours out of town, just to get away from screens and traffic and the constant noise that had started to make our apartment feel smaller than it was. By the time we reached the lake, the sun was low and orange, bleeding through the trees like fire trapped behind glass. We set up our tent, cooked cheap noodles on a portable stove, and watched the reflection of our little fire flicker across the still water. For the first time in months, everything felt right. It wasn't until the forest went completely dark that the stillness began to feel wrong. You know that moment when the night goes too quiet? When even the crickets stop like they're holding their breath? That's how it started. The air grew heavy as if the woods themselves were listening. I remember Emily sitting beside me, brushing dirt from her jeans, saying, "Do you hear that?" I shook my head. "Hear what?" And then came the first knock, not loud, just one clear tap against the side of the tent. Like someone testing it with a finger. We froze. Milo's head lifted immediately, ears pricked, his low growl vibrating against the ground. Emily whispered my name, but before I could speak, there was another knock, same sound, same spot, slow, deliberate. I unzipped the tent, flashlight in hand, sweeping the beam across the trees. Nothing. Just tall black trunks and an ocean of silence pressing down on us. I stepped out, called out, "Hello?" No answer. But the moment I turned the light back toward the tent, I saw it, a faint handprint pressed against the nylon, right where the knocks had come from. I told myself it was condensation, or maybe Emily brushing against the wall earlier. But when I touched it, the fabric was cold. Ice cold. We didn't sleep much that night. The knocks came again, exactly at 3:17 a.m. Then silence. It became a pattern. Every night. One knock, same time, same place. On the third night, I decided I'd wait for it. Sit awake, flashlight ready. Emily thought I was overreacting. She laughed, said it was probably an animal. But animals don't knock, so I waited. Watched the seconds crawl toward 3:17. The fire had died to glowing embers. The woods outside were ink black, no wind, no sound. And then, right on time, the knock came. But this time, it came from inside the tent wall, inches from my face. The sound was soft, almost polite. Just one knock, but it was enough to make me forget how to breathe. Emily woke when she heard me scrambling for the flashlight. "What happened?" Before I could answer, Milo lunged toward the fabric, snarling. And that's when the entire tent wall bulged inward, as if someone was pressing their face from the outside. We both screamed. I swung the light up, and but the second the beam hit, the shape vanished. The forest went quiet again. But it wasn't an ordinary quiet. It was the kind that feels heavy, like it's waiting for you to speak first. We packed up before sunrise. But I didn't know then that leaving wouldn't change anything. Because sometimes when something starts watching you out there, It doesn't stay in the woods. We were halfway home when I realized the forest hadn't let us go. Emily sat in the passenger seat, half asleep, her head resting against the window. Milo was curled up on the back seat, whining every few minutes like he was dreaming something bad. I remember the highway was empty, just that long gray ribbon cutting through the dawn. Then I saw the time on the dashboard clock, 3:17 a.m., the same time. And right when the second digit clicked, the car made a soft sound. A tap. From the back seat. I glanced in the mirror expecting to see Milo standing, maybe hitting the door with his paw, but he was asleep. Perfectly still. Then another tap. Louder this time. From inside the trunk. I felt my hands tighten around the steering wheel. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Emily didn't answer. She was still leaning against the window. But her eyes were open. She was staring outside into the trees rushing past, her face pale in the cold blue dawn. I reached out to touch her arm and she jerked back like I'd burned her. "Don't stop," she whispered. "What?" "Just don't stop the car." Something in her tone scared me more than the knocks. It wasn't panic. It was certainty. Like she already knew what would happen if I did. So I didn't stop. Not when we passed the gas station. Not when I saw something move in the rearview mirror. Not even when I heard Milo whining again. It wasn't until we pulled into our apartment's parking lot that Emily finally exhaled. "It's over," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We're home." But it wasn't over. That night I woke up to the sound of something tapping again. One knock, soft, steady. This time against our bedroom wall. I checked the time on my phone. 3:17 a.m., the same minute. Every single night I turned on the light. Emily wasn't in bed. The blanket beside me was cold, her pillow untouched. My heart started racing as I scanned the room. The open door, the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. And then I saw her shadow. It stretched across the hallway wall, her silhouette standing just outside the doorway. She was completely still. No breathing, no sound. "Just that shape, Em?" I whispered. No reply. I got up slowly, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The closer I moved, the colder the air became. When I reached the door frame, the shadow moved, but not her. The shadow moved first. It turned toward me before she did. I must have made a sound, some kind of gasp, because Emily blinked and stepped forward like she'd been asleep standing. "Why are you up?" she asked, confused. "You were—" I started but stopped. Because there was no shadow anymore, just empty wall. We didn't talk about it the next morning. She didn't even remember getting out of bed. But later that day, while I was scrolling through the photos we took at the lake, I noticed something. In the background of one of the shots behind our tent, there was a shape standing among the trees. Tall, still, barely visible. At first I thought it was just a tree trunk, but when I zoomed in, I saw a hand, pressed flat against the tent wall. The same spot I'd heard the knock, the same shape I'd seen bulge inward. That's when I realized the sound hadn't been coming from outside. It had been coming through. I didn't tell Emily what I saw in that photo. Not right away. Some part of me hoped that ignoring it might make it less real. Like the moment I said it out loud. Whatever had followed us would finally know I'd noticed. But that night, I realized it didn't need me to speak. It already knew. We went to bed early, trying to shake off the exhaustion that had clung to us since we left the lake. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of the dog pacing near the door, nails clicking softly against the floor. I whispered his name, but he wouldn't come. Just stood there, ears flat, growling low. Then came the knock, one, soft, slow. Not on the wall this time, on the window. Our second-floor window. I remember that sick, dizzy silence that follows fear. When your heartbeat becomes the only thing you can hear. I turned my head just enough to see the curtain tremble slightly, like someone's breath was moving it. Emily woke too. She whispered, "Please don't get up." But I already was. I pulled the curtain aside just a fraction, and there it was. A faint outline of a face on the other side of the glass lit by the streetlight below. Pale, eyes too dark to catch any light at all. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared back through me. Then it smiled. I fell backward, shouting her name. When I looked again, the window was empty. Nothing outside but cold rain. But on the inside of the glass, a handprint. That same hand. We didn't sleep again. By morning, the print had faded, like condensation drying in sunlight. But the feeling it left behind didn't. It clung to the house and a weight in every room. The days blurred. Small things started changing. The clock stopped at 3:17 every night, even when we replaced the batteries. Our dog refused to sleep indoors. Emily started sleepwalking again. I'd find her standing in the hallway, always facing the same wall, whispering under her breath. The last night I saw her, I woke to that same whisper. Except it wasn't hers. It came from the corner of the room. A voice that sounded like her, but wasn't shaped right. Like it had been copied by someone who didn't understand tone or rhythm. It said my name once, then, "You shouldn't have answered." I turned on the light, but the corner was empty. The next morning, so was the bed. Her phone, her clothes, her car, everything was still here. Just not her. The police called it a disappearance. They said maybe she went for a walk and never came back. But I know she didn't leave. Because I still hear her sometimes, right before 3:17, tapping once on the wall beside the bed. I moved apartments. Changed numbers. Deleted every photo. But the knock, it followed. Always one knock. Always at the same time. Sometimes it's the wall. Sometimes the floor. Last night it came from the inside of my closet door. I didn't open it. I'm scared that if I do, she'll be standing there. Not as she was, but as something wearing her voice, and the worst part is, I'm starting to knock back. I didn't know about the others until it was too late. Their names started popping up in online forums first. Random threads about missing campers, weird forest lights, voices on radios. At first it felt like an RG, or some internet urban legend pieced together by bored insomniacs. Until it happened to me. I wasn't even camping for fun. I work in tech, the kind of job where you forget the color of sunlight after a few months indoors. My therapist suggested I unplug, so I did. One weekend, one forest, one tent, no Wi-Fi. I even left my laptop at home. The only thing I brought, stupidly, was my phone, just in case. The first day was uneventful. I set up camp beside a narrow creek, built a small fire, and sat there listening to water and wind and my own heartbeat. It was peaceful until my phone buzzed. I'd turned it off hours ago. The screen glowed faint white and showed the clock, 3:17 p.m., but no notifications. Just a new folder in my audio files titled Recordings. Inside there was one file. I hadn't made it. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m., 12 hours ahead. I should have deleted it, but curiosity has always been my curse. I put in my earbuds and pressed play. At first all I heard was static, faint and uneven. Then beneath it, breathing. My breathing. I could tell by the rhythm, the pauses between each inhale. I heard myself say, "Hello?" And then another voice answer, "Don't stop the car." It was my voice. But I was alone. I shut it off, told myself I was just tired, that the phone must have picked up a corrupted file. But every hour afterward, a new recording appeared. Each one exactly 60 minutes apart. At 4:17, I heard myself humming a tune I didn't know. At 5:17, I heard the sound of something knocking. At 6:17, I heard another voice, low, distant, whispering my name. By sunset, my phone had 45 recordings. I didn't listen to the rest. I just threw it into my backpack and tried to convince myself I was imagining things. When darkness fell, the woods changed. The air turned cold and the trees started creaking like old bones. I built another fire and sat close to it, the orange light pushing the dark back just far enough to feel safe. That's when my phone started vibrating again, violently, as if something inside it wanted out. It lit up the inside of my tent like lightning. I didn't touch it. I just watched as the screen flickered through hundreds of new files appearing one by one. Recording 317, 1. Recording 317, 200. Recording 317, 600. Then it stopped. The flashlight turned on by itself. The lens was pointed directly at me. I saw my reflection in the black glass. And then I saw something move behind it. A faint silhouette standing inside the reflection just beyond the light. It whispered, barely audible through the speaker, "You're next." I threw the phone out of the tent. It landed somewhere in the dirt, still glowing faintly. I didn't sleep. Not a single minute. At dawn, I found the phone 10 feet away, screen cracked but still working. When I unlocked it, the entire gallery was filled with photos. Hundreds of them. Each one was of me, asleep, from angles that shouldn't exist. Directly above, behind, inside the tent, and in the corner of every frame, just barely visible. That same white light. I ran for the car before the sun was fully up. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice. The phone was still in my pocket, still buzzing with that faint electric hum, even though the screen was black. I kept telling myself, just drive. Just get out of the woods. This is nothing. This is a glitch, but the woods didn't look the same anymore. Every tree trunk seemed closer to the road than it had been the day before, leaning in as if to listen. My rearview mirror showed nothing but dark bark sliding by, except every now and then, a brief flicker of white light like a camera flash, far back in the trees. Then my phone vibrated harder and started playing a recording on its own, my voice from hours earlier. "I'm leaving now." Followed by another voice, low, almost gentle, saying, "You can't." I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. It kept playing, but now the voice had changed. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't me. It was my brother's voice. "I don't have a brother." The voice started whispering coordinates, numbers I didn't recognize at first, until I realized it was leading me back toward the campsite. My GPS, which I hadn't turned on, lit up with a route automatically drawn. I pressed the brake. "No," I whispered. "No, I'm not going back." The car radio snapped on with a burst of static. A voice came through, mine again, but older, ragged. "You already did." The road ahead forked. Left toward the highway, right toward a dirt path I'd never taken. My hands turned the wheel before I could stop them. The dirt road narrowed, branches scraping the sides of the car, sunlight flickering in a strobe through the trees. My phone fell off the seat onto the floorboard, screen up. For a second, the glow of the screen looked like a small white eye staring up at me. Then a new file appeared. Recording 317, live. I could see the waveform moving on the screen even though it wasn't playing yet. My voice was already speaking. "He's here. He's in the car." I slammed the brakes. Dust rose around me. The forest was dead silent. I turned slowly to the back seat. Empty. Then my phone started playing the recording. My voice whispering, "Look closer." I opened the back door. Nothing. Empty. The trunk? Empty. Then I heard it, a single knock. Not on the car. From inside the phone. The speaker clicked once, then a small child's voice whispered, "Smile." The phone's camera turned on by itself, front-facing, and for a second on the screen sitting right beside me there was someone else, a pale figure. No face, holding my phone like it belonged to them. I dropped the phone and hit the gas. The screen cracked under my heel. But even as I sped out of the trees, I could hear that little voice echoing from the broken speaker. 3:17. When I reached the highway, I thought it was over. But when I checked the glove compartment for my charger, there was a sheet of paper inside that hadn't been there before. Same handwriting I'd seen online. Under posts about the missing couple, about Sam. Small, neat letters. Every road leads back to the fire. I didn't go home right away. I drove until the fuel light came on, until the trees disappeared and the horizon opened into dull gray sky. My nerves felt burned raw. Every vibration of the road sounded like that knock. Every glint of sunlight on glass looked like that white light chasing me through the trees. At a rest stop, I threw the cracked phone into a trash bin. I sat on the curb, head in my hands, breathing in exhaust and the faint smell of pine carried from miles away. For the first time in 2 days, everything was quiet. When I finally looked up, there was another phone lying beside me. Same model, same cracked corner, screen dark. I left it there and walked inside the gas station. The clerk looked half asleep behind the counter. "You okay, man?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just grabbed a drink, paid in cash, and walked back out. The phone was gone. Back in the car, the dashboard clock was frozen at 3:17 a.m., even though sunlight poured through the windshield. I switched off the engine, then on again. Still 3:17, then from the radio, click. My voice soft, trembling. "You shouldn't have thrown it away." I hit the power button, but the radio stayed on. The sound changed, not static, but breathing. The same low inhale I'd heard in the tent before it all started. I looked around the car, every mirror, every angle. Nothing. Then my GPS screen lit up. A red dot pulsing where I was sitting. Another dot pulsing behind me. I turned. Nothing in the back seat. Nothing outside. But when I looked back at the GPS, the second dot was gone. I drove again, not knowing where to go. Somewhere with people, I thought. Somewhere bright. I found a diner off the main road, all neon and chrome. It looked open, lights humming like bees. Inside, a few truckers sat over coffee. I took the farthest booth. My hands shook as I scrolled through a stranger's phone the diner kept plugged into the wall. One of those charging station phones for customers. I just wanted to check the time. When the screen unlocked, the wallpaper froze me. It was a photo of a campfire. And in the corner of the image, 3 silhouettes, one of them mine. I dropped the phone and ran for the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection in the mirror looked wrong, too slow, a frame behind me. When I blinked, it didn't. The lights flickered. Then the intercom crackled through the diner speakers. My voice again, calm this time. "Every story ends where it began." When I walked back out, the booths were empty. The front door was open. Outside, the parking lot glowed with that same soft white light. And lined across the asphalt were dozens of phones, face up, screens on, all playing the same video in perfect sync. It was me, sleeping. In the tent. From above. Each phone played the same moment over and over. Me turning over, breathing heavy, and then something else moving in the dark beside me. One by one, the screens started flickering to black. But before they did, each showed a single image. A campfire burning in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by people sitting completely still. Their faces weren't clear. Until the last phone died, and in that frozen final frame I recognized them all. The couple from the article, Sam, and the fire watcher from a story I'd read months before. And behind them, someone else. Sitting in the light, holding a phone, recording. It took me a few seconds to realize who it was. Me. It's hard to explain how the thing shifts once it's inside your life. At first it's knocks, lights, voices you can almost dismiss. Then it starts copying you. I never went camping with any of the others. I never even met them. I was just a woman trying to spend a quiet weekend with my sister in a state park 2 towns over. We brought an old canvas tent, a cooler full of snacks, and a little battery-powered radio because it reminded us of our childhood trips. The first night was uneventful. The second night, the radio began repeating us, not echoing, not feedback. Repeating, we'd speak, and 3 seconds later, our voices would come back out of the static. But wrong, flatter, slower, like an imitation. At first it was almost funny. I said, "Hello?" Into the radio. It said, "Hell." "Oh, back." We laughed. Then it started saying things we hadn't said. "You're late," it said in my sister's voice. "Too late," it said in mine. We turned it off, took out the batteries, even smashed the antenna. It still spoke. A low whisper, the same number, 317. That night my sister woke me pale and shaking. She said she'd dreamed of walking out of the tent and into a circle of people sitting around a fire. They were all completely still, like mannequins. She swore one of them had my face. I told her it was just a nightmare. Then I noticed her wrists, 4 small bruises, like fingers pressed too hard. We tried to pack, but the zipper on the tent wouldn't budge. It was as if the teeth had fused together. We cut a slit in the fabric and crawled out. The woods outside were too quiet, like we'd stepped into a sealed room. The radio sat on the log where we'd left it, its speaker glowing faintly though it had no power. "You shouldn't leave," it said in her voice. "Then stay." We ran. No path, no map, just running until our lungs burned. We reached a clearing and stopped, trying to catch our breath. That's when I realized the clearing was wrong. The trees formed a perfect circle. In the center sat a fire that hadn't been there before, burning white instead of orange. Around it sat a ring of people. Still. Silent. Their faces blurred like bad reception, but when one of them turned, I saw enough. It was my sister. And she was still standing beside me. She grabbed my arm. "We're dreaming," she whispered. "We have to be dreaming." The figures around the fire all turned their heads at once like a flock of birds shifting. And then the radio, lying in the grass at our feet, whispered in both of our voices at once, "Sit down." We didn't sit down. We ran again. Or at least we thought we did.
I remember grabbing my sister's hand and pushing through the ring of trees.
But with every few steps, the sound of the fire stayed exactly the same, behind us and ahead of us at once. The woods folded in ways that didn't make sense. Branches brushed my shoulders even when there were no trees close enough to touch. The ground felt soft and hollow, like we were running on a drum. Then I started hearing the voices, not from the radio anymore, but from the woods themselves. They whispered my name in my sister's voice. They whispered her name in mine. At first they sounded far away. Then they started matching our breathing, our footfalls, every little sound we made. "Stop," my sister gasped. "Please just stop." We stumbled into another clearing. This one looked like ours. The same fire pit, same log, even the same half-crushed soda can. For a second I thought we'd run in a circle, but then I noticed something else. The tent was already pitched, and inside it the sleeping bags were occupied. We crept closer. My flashlight trembled so badly the beam jumped. 2 figures were lying there, faces turned away. One of them moved. The same small twitch my sister makes when she's about to wake up. My stomach dropped. They were us, not perfect copies, and softer somehow, edges blurring like old film. The me in the tent opened her eyes. Her pupils were washed out white, reflecting the flashlight back at me. Then she smiled. And the echo came again right behind us, saying everything we said a heartbeat later. "Run," I said. "Run," it said. We bolted, tearing through brush until the trees thinned and the ground began to slope downward. My sister tripped, tumbling into a shallow ditch. I slid after her. When I reached her, she was sitting upright, frozen. "Listen," she whispered. I didn't want to, but I did. From somewhere deeper underground came a faint, rhythmic sound, knocking, slow, steady, once, twice, 3 times. The earth beneath us vibrated with each hit, like something large was pressing up from below. I grabbed her arm and pulled. "We have to go," but she didn't move. She just stared at the dirt. "Do you hear it?" she said. "It's repeating us." The knocking changed. It began to tap in time with her words. 4 beats, paused, then again. A conversation we couldn't understand. The flashlight flickered. When the beam came back, my sister was looking straight at me, eyes wide. "There's someone under us." Before I could answer, the dirt shifted just slightly, like something inside the ground had exhaled. The smell of burnt wood filled the air. We climbed out of the ditch and ran toward the open fields beyond the trees. Behind us, the ground caved in with a deep, hollow thud. When we finally reached the road, I dared to look back. The circle of trees glowed faint white, as though firelight was flickering inside each trunk. I turned to my sister to say we made it. But she wasn't beside me, only her echo was. Her voice soft and too calm coming from the edge of the trees. I'm right here. For a moment I couldn't move. The road was empty. Cold air swept over the asphalt like breath. My sister's voice kept drifting out of the trees, steady and wrong, like a recording someone had slowed down. I shouted her name again, but the echo didn't change. It kept saying, "I'm right here," even as I heard twigs snapping deeper in the woods. I took one step back toward the tree line and stopped. Something was standing between the trunks, a pale outline shaped like my sister. Her head tilted to one side, mouth moving soundlessly. The glow of the white firelight pulsed from inside her chest like a heartbeat. Then my phone buzzed. I hadn't touched it since the campsite. It lit up on the road where I'd dropped it, screen cracked but still working. A new voice memo was playing by itself. My sister's voice whispered, "Don't follow me." I stared at the tree line. "If that's really you," I whispered, "say something only I would know." The pale figure tilted its head the other way, then stepped forward, not walking but sliding. The closer it came, the more the light inside it dimmed. Its mouth opened and closed like it was trying to speak. Then a second voice came from the phone. Mine this time, but hoarse, frayed. "Every road leads back to the fire." The figure stopped at the edge of the pavement. Up close, I could see its face flicker between mine and hers, like two images fighting for the same space. I backed up, heart hammering. "I'm not going back," I said aloud. The thing smiled. Not her smile. A deep, wide grin that didn't belong to any human. Then it raised a hand and knocked once on the air between us. A hollow sound that felt like it hit my ribs. I ran. I don't remember how I made it to town. Just running, headlights, neon signs, everything a blur until I collapsed in a diner booth, gasping for air. When I opened my hand, my phone was still there. A new photo filled the screen. It was me, sitting at a table inside the same diner. My sister was across from me, smiling faintly as if she'd been there all along. But when I looked up, the booth was empty. No one across from me. The jukebox clicked on, unprompted. Out of its tinny speaker came our two voices, overlapping. "Sit down. Stay. Sit down. Stay." And then I understood. It wasn't copying us to scare us. It was copying us to keep us. The lights, the knocks, the echoes, they weren't chasing us away. They were building us. Little fragments recorded piece by piece until there was enough of us for it to keep. I don't remember leaving the diner. My next memory is waking up back at my apartment. Phone on the nightstand, glowing white. The clock on the wall frozen at 3:17. In the distance, faint as a breath, I heard my sister's voice call from the hall. "It's time." When I opened the door, the hallway stretched out like a path through trees, and at the end of it burned a small white fire. I didn't know about the others until it was too late. Their names started popping up in online forums first. Random threads about missing campers, weird forest lights, voices on radios. At first it felt like an ARG, or some internet urban legend pieced together by bored insomniacs. Until it happened to me. I wasn't even camping for fun. I work in tech, the kind of job where you forget the color of sunlight after a few months indoors. My therapist suggested I unplug, so I did. One weekend, one forest, one tent, no Wi-Fi. I even left my laptop at home. The only thing I brought, stupidly, was my phone. Just in case. The first day was uneventful. I set up camp beside a narrow creek, built a small fire, and sat there listening to water and wind and my own heartbeat. It was peaceful until my phone buzzed. I'd turned it off hours ago. The screen glowed faint white and showed the clock, 3:17 p.m., but no notifications. just a new folder in my audio files titled Recordings. Inside there was one file. I hadn't made it. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m., 12 hours ahead. I should have deleted it, but curiosity has always been my curse. I put in my earbuds and pressed play. At first, all I heard was static, faint and uneven. Then beneath it, breathing. My breathing. I could tell by the rhythm, the pauses between each inhale. I heard myself say, "Hello?" And then another voice answer, "Don't stop the car." It was my voice. But I was alone. I shut it off, told myself I was just tired, that the phone must have picked up a corrupted file. But every hour afterward, a new recording appeared, each one exactly 60 minutes apart. At 4:17, I heard myself humming a tune I didn't know. At 5:17, I heard the sound of something knocking. At 6:17, I heard another voice, low, distant, whispering my name. By sunset, my phone had 45 recordings. I didn't listen to the rest. I just threw it into my backpack and tried to convince myself I was imagining things. When darkness fell, the woods changed. The air turned cold and the trees started creaking like old bones. I built another fire and sat close to it, the orange light pushing the dark back just far enough to feel safe. That's when my phone started vibrating again. Violently, as if something inside it wanted out. It lit up the inside of my tent like lightning. I didn't touch it. I just watched as the screen flickered through hundreds of new files appearing one by one. Recording 3:17:1. Recording 3:17:200. Recording 3:17:600. Then it stopped. The flashlight turned on by itself. The lens was pointed directly at me. I saw my reflection in the black glass. And then I saw something move behind it. A faint silhouette standing inside the reflection just beyond the light. It whispered, barely audible through the speaker, "You're next." I threw the phone out of the tent. It landed somewhere in the dirt, still glowing faintly. I didn't sleep. Not a single minute. At dawn, I found the phone 10 feet away, screen cracked but still working. When I unlocked it, the entire gallery was filled with photos. Hundreds of them. Each one was of me, asleep, from angles that shouldn't exist, directly above, behind, inside the tent, and in the corner of every frame, just barely visible. That same white light. I ran for the car before the sun was fully up. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice. The phone was still in my pocket, still buzzing with that faint electric hum even though the screen was black. I kept telling myself, just drive. Just get out of the woods. This is nothing. This is a glitch, but the woods didn't look the same anymore. Every tree trunk seemed closer to the road than it had been the day before, leaning in as if to listen. My rearview mirror showed nothing but dark bark sliding by, except every now and then, a brief flicker of white light like a camera flash, far back in the trees. Then my phone vibrated harder and started playing a recording on its own, my voice from hours earlier. "I'm leaving now." Followed by another voice, low, almost gentle, saying, "You can't." I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. It kept playing, but now the voice had changed. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't me. It was my brother's voice. I don't have a brother. The voice started whispering coordinates, numbers I didn't recognize at first, until I realized it was leading me back toward the campsite. My GPS, which I hadn't turned on, lit up with a route automatically drawn. I pressed the brake. "No," I whispered. "No, I'm not going back." The car radio snapped on with a burst of static. A voice came through, mine again, but older, ragged. "You already did." The road ahead forked. Left toward the highway, right toward a dirt path I'd never taken. My hands turned the wheel before I could stop them. The dirt road narrowed, branches scraping the sides of the car, sunlight flickering in a strobe through the trees. My phone fell off the seat onto the floorboard, screen up. For a second, the glow of the screen looked like a small white eye staring up at me. Then a new file appeared. Recording 3:17, live. I could see the waveform moving on the screen even though it wasn't playing yet. My voice was already speaking. "He's here. He's in the car." I slammed the brakes. Dust rose around me. The forest was dead silent. I turned slowly to the back seat. Empty. Then my phone started playing the recording. My voice whispering, "Look closer." I opened the back door. Nothing. Empty. The trunk? Empty. Then I heard it, a single knock. Not on the car. From inside the phone. The speaker clicked once, then a small child's voice whispered, "Smile." The phone's camera turned on by itself, front-facing. And for a second on the screen sitting right beside me there was someone else. A pale figure. No face. Holding my phone like it belonged to them. I dropped the phone and hit the gas. The screen cracked under my heel. But even as I sped out of the trees, I could hear that little voice echoing from the broken speaker. 3:17. When I reached the highway, I thought it was over. But when I checked the glove compartment for my charger, there was a sheet of paper inside that hadn't been there before. Same handwriting I'd seen online. Under posts about the missing couple, about Sam, small, neat letters. "Every road leads back to the fire. I didn't go home right away." I drove until the fuel light came on, until the trees disappeared and the horizon opened into dull gray sky. My nerves felt burned raw. Every vibration of the road sounded like that knock. Every glint of sunlight on glass looked like that white light chasing me through the trees. At a rest stop, I threw the cracked phone into a trash bin. I sat on the curb, head in my hands, breathing in exhaust and the faint smell of pine carried from miles away. For the first time in 2 days, everything was quiet. When I finally looked up, there was another phone lying beside me. Same model. Same cracked corner, screen dark. I left it there and walked inside the gas station. The clerk looked half asleep behind the counter. "You okay, man?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just grabbed a drink, paid in cash, and walked back out. The phone was gone. Back in the car, the dashboard clock was frozen at 3:17 a.m., even though sunlight poured through the windshield. I switched off the engine, then on again. Still 3:17, then from the radio, click. My voice soft, trembling. "You shouldn't have thrown it away." I hit the power button, but the radio stayed on. The sound changed, not static, but breathing. The same low inhale I'd heard in the tent before it all started. I looked around the car, every mirror, every angle. Nothing. Then my GPS screen lit up. A red dot pulsing where I was sitting. Another dot pulsing behind me. I turned. Nothing in the back seat. Nothing outside. But when I looked back at the GPS, the second dot was gone. I drove again, not knowing where to go. Somewhere with people, I thought. Somewhere bright. I found a diner off the main road, all neon and chrome. It looked open, lights humming like bees. Inside, a few truckers sat over coffee. I took the farthest booth. My hands shook as I scrolled through a stranger's phone the diner kept plugged into the wall, one of those charging station phones for customers. I just wanted to check the time. When the screen unlocked, the wallpaper froze me. It was a photo of a campfire, and in the corner of the image, 3 silhouettes. One of them mine. I dropped the phone and ran for the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection in the mirror looked wrong, too slow, a frame behind me. When I blinked, it didn't. The lights flickered. Then the intercom crackled through the diner speakers. My voice again, calm this time. "Every story ends where it began." When I walked back out, the booths were empty. The front door was open. Outside, the parking lot glowed with that same soft white light. And lined across the asphalt were dozens of phones, face up, screens on, all playing the same video in perfect sync. It was me, sleeping. In the tent. From above, each phone played the same moment over and over. Me turning over, breathing heavy, and then something else moving in the dark beside me. One by one, the screens started flickering to black. But before they did, each showed a single image. A campfire burning in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by people sitting completely still. Their faces weren't clear. Until the last phone died, and in that frozen final frame I recognized them all. The couple from the article, Sam, and the fire watcher from a story I'd read months before. And behind them, someone else. Sitting in the light, holding a phone, recording. It took me a few seconds to realize who it was, me. I don't remember falling asleep that night. All I know is that I woke up in a tent that wasn't mine. The fabric was old and yellowed, smelling of damp soil and ash. I could hear breathing, several people close. But when I turned, there was no one there. Only sleeping bags zipped, shaped like bodies that didn't move. For a long minute I thought I was dreaming. Then I saw my own backpack in the corner. The same one I lost months ago when I ran from that thing in the woods. The zipper twitched once, like something inside had just exhaled. When I crawled outside, the world looked wrong. The trees weren't trees anymore, more like silhouettes burned into the sky, faintly glowing from the inside. The moon hung low and colorless, and beneath it were 9 tents, arranged in a perfect circle around a white fire that gave no smoke. Each tent was different. One had a child stuffed bare by the flap, another a dented metal lantern. I knew them all, the couple from the first story, the brothers with the lights, the tech worker who threw away his phone, the sisters lost in the echo. And somewhere, me, it had brought us all here. The fire didn't crackle. It breathed. I could feel the air move with it. Slow inhale, slow exhale, like lungs buried under the dirt. Every time it glowed brighter, the tents shivered slightly, as if the sleepers inside were dreaming the same dream. That's when I realized I could hear something under the breathing. Words. Faint, layered, repeating in rhythm with the fire's light. Every road leads back to the fire, over and over, hundreds of voices whispering it like a chant. Some sounded human, some didn't. I turned, heart pounding. Across from me, someone else was crawling out of a tent. A man, thin, pale, eyes sunken. He looked around just as lost as I was. "Where are we?" he whispered. "I don't know," I said. "I think we've been here before." He shook his head. "No, I died." Before I could ask what he meant, he pointed to the fire. It showed me my body. I saw myself. A voice cut him off, and calm, measured, close. "You all died." The figure stepped out of the light, dressed in torn hiking clothes that could have belonged to anyone. Its face was wrong, shifting, flickering between features. Every time I blinked, it wore someone else's face. Emily's, Sam's, my sister's, even mine. It smiled with all of them. "You called and I answered. What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking. It tilted its head. "To keep you." The man beside me took a step back. "We're dreaming," he said. "This isn't real." "Of course it isn't," the figure said, and for a moment its tone softened, almost kind. "Dreams are what you make of the pieces left behind." The fire flared white. I shielded my eyes, and when I looked again, the figure was gone. But now the people from the tents were awake, all 9 of them. They stood in a circle facing inward, the firelight reflecting in their blank eyes. Their mouths began to move. Not in unison. Not words. Just soft noises. Murmurs, sighs, whispers like radio static. The sound built slowly, rising until the air itself felt heavy. Then, one by one, they turned to face me. I tried to speak, but my throat felt full of smoke. The nearest one stepped forward. A woman, eyes wide, pupils pale. I knew her face from the news. Emily. The first one who disappeared. She reached out and touched my hand. Her skin was cold, but not dead. Just empty. "Wake up," she whispered. And then the world blinked. I was in my apartment. For a second I thought I'd really woken up. Morning light leaked through the blinds, my phone buzzing on the nightstand. But when I picked it up, the screen showed 3:17 a.m. The phone opened to a video already playing. A shot of me, asleep, turning over in bed. Then, in the corner of the frame, something leaned into view. My sister smiling faintly. Her lips moved. "See? You made it back." The video ended, replaced by live camera feed. But the image didn't match the room. The bed in the video was empty. The person holding the phone, my phone, was standing in my apartment right now filming me. The breath behind me came before the voice. "You never left." I turned slowly. Standing there, half in shadow, was me. Same clothes, same scar, same face. The only difference was the eyes. They glowed faint white, reflecting the phone's light like animal eyes in the dark. He smiled. "Now it's your turn." And for the first time since it all began, the knocks, the voices, the lights, I understood what it wanted. Not to haunt us. To replace us, the thing doesn't kill. It collects. It waits for you to remember the sound of its knock. And once you do, it walks through. When I opened my eyes, the world had seams. You could see the places where the night had been stitched together. Thin, gleaming threads running between the trees through the sky, even across my own hands. If I moved too quickly, the stitches tugged. If I breathed too loudly, the thread hummed. I was back at the circle. 9/10. The white fire breathing in and out like a sleeping animal. The others stood around it again, watching me the way people watch a window, waiting for a reflection to appear. Emily's face was among them, too calm, the light living in her pupils. Sam stood beside her with his sleeve rolled up, the 4 bruised fingerprints on his wrist the color of ash. The tech worker who threw his phone away. The sister who walked out of the echo, and the man who said he had died, eyes glazed with distance as if he could see behind me even when he stared straight ahead. I didn't ask how we got back. You learn not to ask questions when answers can open doors. The white fire inhaled. I felt the tug in my chest as if a cord ran from its coals into my ribs. When it exhaled, the tents rustled and the circle of us leaned forward in the smallest, most helpless bow. I tried to step back and felt that invisible thread grow taut. It didn't stop me. It only reminded me of which direction was home. A voice spoke from the far side of the fire. Not loud, not theatrical, just certain. Everyone sits where they sat the first time. The figure wearing too many faces eased into view again, and this time, it didn't bother choosing. Its features swam and settled and swam again. A slideshow of all of us, of people I hadn't met, of a child with rain in her hair, of an old man who never left his chair by a fire that wasn't a fire at all. When it smiled, every one of those faces smiled in sequence like a flipbook. "We're not dead," I said, though my voice had the thin paper sound of someone insisting on a different ending. "We can go back. You will," it said. "That is the trap." The word hung in the white heat. Behind the figure, something knocked under the earth. 1, 2, 3, and a pause. The same slow rhythm the woods had learned from us. "You replaced us," I said. "You wore our voices, our shadows. Why?" Its eyes softened, if an arrangement of features without a final form could soften. "Because you asked me to." The others didn't move. They watched with a stillness that felt like respect or paralysis or both. Emily tilted her head as if remembering a long-ago conversation. Sam's jaw worked as if trying to swallow a word that had grown teeth. A thin, persistent wind ran laps around the clearing without touching any of us. The white fire inhaled us a little closer. "You told the darkness to come," the figure went on. "You told it to answer back. You knocked first. You said hello. You held up the recording device and asked for proof. You asked the night to repeat you, and the night learned your shape. I wanted to say that wasn't consent. That fear isn't permission. But when I opened my mouth, the fire pulsed and my own voice came back from the trees behind me, repeating my thoughts before I'd finished them. "That isn't," it said, then waited for me to complete the sentence so it could tidy the echo. I stayed quiet. The echo exhaled. The figure nodded toward the tents. "Sit." We didn't move. Or I didn't. The rest of them folded at the waist like the start of a ritual and took their places. Each sat outside the tent that had once been theirs. Each placed their hands on their knees exactly the way their echoes had sat in the recordings. A choreography remembered by bruises, by static, by light. I remained standing until my thread drew tight enough to make my heart lurch. Then I sat. The ground was warm. It hummed under my palms with the sound of a million distant voices whispering a single number. 317, 317, 317, until it melted into a low electric purr. The figure circled us the way a teacher circles a classroom. "This is the part where you think there is a decision," it said. "There is. But the decision is not exit or stay. It is which of you returns and which of you remains to keep the fire lit." I tasted iron. "You want a trade." "It is not want," it said. "It is structure. Every road leads back to the fire because the fire is a mouth and mouths are meant to feed." The man who had claimed he'd died lifted his eyes. "On what?" The figure considered. Faces blurred, settled, blurred. Continuity. Wind moved through us without touching our skin, like a memory playing in the wrong room. The white fire inhaled and the stitches in the night tightened until the sky creaked. From beyond the circle came a new sound. A chorus of footsteps trudging in slow lockstep. People emerged between the trees, not strangers, copies, a second ring of us. Each of us had a twin walking out of the dark with the same walk, the same scar, the same reluctance in the eyes. The second me stopped behind the first me and laid a hand on my shoulder, gentle, claiming. "Which one goes back?" the figure asked, voice kind. "The one who is tired of knocking, or the one who has learned how to breathe in time with the fire?" I didn't look at the other me. My copy's hand was warm in a way that made me feel colder. I could smell pine and wet nylon and the bitter edge of burned electronics. The other me leaned down until our faces were twin moons over the same water. He whispered in my ear in my own voice, almost affectionate. "Let me do the part you can't." "What part is that?" "Staying." I looked to Emily. The second Emily stood behind the first, fingers resting lightly on her shoulders like a practiced photographer arranging a portrait. Sam's second self cupped the first Sam's wrist, thumb landing directly on the bruised fingerprints as if reminding him where he belonged. Around the circle, the pairs were forming, the way a ritual forms out of repetition until it is indistinguishable from a habit. The fire exhaled. The white light dimmed, and in the dimness I saw our reflections wobble across one another like a deck of cards being riffled. Whoever cut them had left fingerprints on every edge. The figure clapped once, a small domestic sound. "Choose." "What happens if none of us do?" I asked. It smiled with an exhausted pity that didn't belong to any one face. "You already are." The second me's hand tightened. Not possessive, not cruel, just certain. I felt the weight of everything that had happened pressed down into a single point. The first knock on the tent. The face at the window. The lights pacing my breath. The phones ringing with my voice from a day I hadn't lived yet. The radio repeating thoughts. The hall that turned into a forest. The white fire that breathed. The sentence that kept finding me in strange handwriting like a signature the night used to sign its work. "Every road leads back to the fire." I realized then that the sentence wasn't a threat. It was a map. The figure looked up. Not at us, but at the seams in the sky. As if listening to instructions drifting down from a ceiling beyond the night. After a moment it nodded, satisfied, and faced me. "One of you goes back," it said, "to carry the story. One of you stays, to keep the door." My copy kissed my forehead, and for a horrible second it felt like warmth, like mercy. "I'm good at doors," he said, and stood in front of me like a second shadow preparing to unhook itself. "Wait," I said, not sure if I was pleading with him or with the fire or with the stitches holding the world together. "If I go back, will any of this still be true?" The figure cocked its head. "Only if you tell it." The white fire inhaled. Threads tightened. The second selves leaned, ready to step forward or back. For the first time I felt not terror but an awful clarity. Stories aren't cages. They are bridges, and bridges go both ways. I stood. Every face turned toward me. Mine, theirs, the many. I took the other me's hand. It was like grasping my reflection in cold water. He smiled a little, proud of me or of himself or of the fire that had taught us how to be twins. "Okay," I said. "I choose." The night leaned in to hear. I chose my own hand, and it felt like choosing a mirror. Cold, exact, patient. The other me didn't resist. He only watched the white fire swell. And in that bright pulse I saw how small I was. A figure stitched into a vast black fabric, one thread among billions. The night wasn't empty. It was woven. Every trail, every room gone quiet at 3:17. Every knock like a fingertip testing the tensile strength of the world's seam. The fire inhaled and all the threads sighed together. A planet-sized lung that remembered everything anyone had ever said to the dark. "Say it," the figure with many faces told me, standing where the heat refused to burn. Stories pick a direction when they're named. I didn't ask what to say. I already knew. The sentence had followed me across forests and apartments and diners and recordings. It wasn't a warning. It was a coordinate. I looked at my other self, at Emily and Sam and the sisters and the quiet man who claimed he had died, at all the copies standing behind them like parentheses. I spoke the line the way you speak a door open. Every road leads back to the fire. The white flared to a color beyond white. A clinical, surgical brightness with no warmth. The light of memory without body. When I raised my hands, I could see their bones through the skin, and on each bone a thin engraved script. Names, dates, times. Not just ours. Everyone who had ever told a story like this, from cave ash to radio static, to the glow of a phone in a sleeping bag. I understood then what the fire was. Not heat, not hunger. A living archive. A consciousness made of tellings. It spoke to me without sound, the way a storm speaks to a ship. It wasn't a language so much as pressure. Not words, but intention. The meaning arrived fully formed. I don't take. You give. You hand me your shape each time you repeat it. I keep the handles so you don't have to hold so tightly to yourself. I relieve and return. I store and release. The other me leaned closer. His breath exactly mine, his smile almost kind.
"And if you go?"
he whispered. "Where will you put your hands?" "On the bridge," I said, surprising myself. "On the part that goes both ways." He nodded as if I'd passed a test he'd already taken. The figure with too many faces raised a palm. "Balance," it said, and the word fell like a key through the circle. The second selves stepped once to the left, once to the right, swapping places with a choreography older than fear. Across from me, Emily's copy slid behind Emily's shoulder like a reflection choosing a person. Sam's twin pressed his thumb against the old bruises. The sisters stood back to back, then turned until their profiles aligned perfectly. One mouth forming vowels the other would complete. "Choose who carries and who keeps," the figure said. But I felt the decision had been made long before words. It wasn't about deserving. It wasn't about strength. It was gravity, a subtle tilt built into the weave by the weight of everything we'd already confessed to the night. The ones who could still look away without shattering would go. The ones who had learned the pulse of the fire, who had matched their breathing to it, would remain to remember the rest of us when we couldn't. My other self placed his palm to my chest, right over the sternum. I felt the thread there, the one that ran to the coals, plucked like a harp string. A note traveled up into my skull and down into the soil, and for a moment I saw the world as the fire did. A lattice of crossings, a map of knocks. Camps in 1,000 countries, trucks on night roads, bedrooms with open doors, diners with jukeboxes that knew our names, people pausing at the same minute for reasons they'd describe later as no reason. Each pause a door. Each door a twin. "I'll keep the door," my copy said, and the way he said it made keeping sound like love. "You walk the bridge." "Wait," I said, turning toward the figure. "If I go back and tell it, is that how you—" Expand? It didn't nod. It didn't need to. The answer was already arriving inside my tongue. Telling is how breath becomes structure. Structure is how you survive yourselves. You're not a monster. I said. Half to it. Half to the part of me that needed something with teeth to blame. Your continuity, the figure finished gently. And consequence, the fire exhaled. In the dimming, I saw a procession beyond the pines. 9 more tents, 9 more circles, wider concentric rings stretching into a horizon the night refused to admit was finite. In each ring, people sat the way we sat, and behind them their doubles waited with hands folded. The rings didn't radiate outward. They radiated inward, each a smaller interior nesting toward a center I couldn't survive to look at. Time, said the figure, and everything tugged. The thread in my chest pulled. The tents leaned. The copies stepped into place like surgeons switching shifts. The ground opened just enough to release a breath someone had buried there a century ago. I felt my body turn weightless, felt the decision lock. I go. He stays. As the light swelled again, I looked at Emily. She met my eyes with a softness I recognized from photographs taken before she vanished. Tell it right, she whispered. The copy behind her finished the sentence in a murmur I felt in my teeth. Tell it like a road. Then the brightness folded. The seam parted. The bridge revealed itself, not wood or stone but sentence. The line I'd repeated became the span beneath my feet, and the words didn't carry me so much as become me. I stepped, and with each step the clause revised the world. Every road leads back to the fire. On fire the syllable broke into sparks, and I fell through language into morning. I woke in my apartment. The clock said 6:41. The date was wrong by a week. My phone lay on the nightstand intact, camera closed, gallery empty except for a single note in the voice memo app. Breathe. Then speak. I stood, and the hallway was just a hallway again. No trees, no white glow. I made coffee with shaking hands and watched the steam draw ghost threads that dissolved before the ceiling. For the first time in months, nothing knocked. At 3:17 that afternoon, the minute passed like any other. Nothing tugging, nothing pausing to listen. I nearly wept from the ordinariness I started telling. I told it to the empty room, then to the page, then into a microphone that pulsed red like a small benevolent heart. I told it as if the telling itself were a lamp you could carry through a place built of mirrors. I told it with my hands open, so the handles would stay with the fire rather than calcify in my fingers. I told it until the words began to feel less like an event, and more like a road sign that had always been there. Obscured by fog you only noticed once it cleared, and sometimes, in the quiet between sentences, I felt a second breath take over for a second. Steady, measured in time with a fire I could no longer see. My other self, keeping the door from swinging shut. Not a prison door, a memory door, a hinge between the story and the world. Nights are nights again. Mostly, the diner plays ordinary songs. The woods are just weather and deer and people trying to make themselves small enough to sleep. But when a story starts in a voice that shakes, when someone says, "You won't believe this," but when a phone screen brightens at the edge of a tent and nobody can swear they turned it on, I listen. I breathe in time with them. I hold the bridge steady so the crossing doesn't take more than it must. And if somewhere far off a single knock sounds at a familiar minute, I don't answer. I say the line and keep walking. Not to break the spell, to keep it, to keep us, the versions that return, intact. Every road leads back to the fire. Not to be burned, to be remembered. The first time we saw the smoke, it didn't look like smoke. It looked like a pencil line someone had drawn straight up the sky and then started to erase with a fingertip. Thin, smudged, too shy to commit to being real. We'd been hiking the high desert breaks below Steens all afternoon. Boots full of grit, mouths full of that coppery dryness you only get when the air is colder than your breath. There were 5 of us, me, Caleb, and 3 other guys who'd hunted together long enough to have arguments that looped like old songs. We weren't lost, but we weren't where the map wanted us either. "Hold up," Caleb said, already lifting the binoculars. He had the ranger-wary squint of men who've seen maps lie. "Tell me I'm not seeing a column." I shaded my eyes and saw it clearly then. The faint gray seam rising from somewhere in the tight dark of the canyon bend. No flicker of flame, no orange pulse. Just that steady exhale, as if the mountain itself were warming its hands. Cabin? Tyler guessed. Somebody wintering in? He said it like a dare. People do winter out here, in old mining shacks and resealed homesteads, and the lonely can turn territorial when a week goes by without another human voice. Or, a burn pile, I offered, though there was nothing scattered in the ravine that looked like human mess. No rusted truck beds, no blue tarps, no half-eaten refrigerators the desert likes to keep as trophies. The smoke thread thinned, thickened, then vanished so completely I almost doubted I'd seen it. The sun felt closer this high. The shadows came early, pooling deep in the sage. We could push to the trucks by dark maybe, if the slope didn't argue. But the cold was already rehearsing its lines. Warmth wins debates. We cut down slope toward where the smoke had been, letting the hillside issue its small punishments. Ankles turned, breath shortened, a rock that rolled when you trusted it. We found the structure at the mouth of a shallow draw, tucked into juniper like it wanted to be forgotten. From above, the roofline had looked crushed. Up close, it wasn't crushed so much as surrendering, the way old timber finally admits the sky is heavier than anyone says. It was a cabin, if cabin just means walls and a chimney and the suggestion of a room. Logs blackened and glazed with age, moss in every seam, the chimney a dark tooth against a whitening sky. Smoke no longer rose, but the air tasted like it had a minute ago. "Hello," Tyler called, careful, friendly, the tone you use for porches you can't see past. His voice went into the wood and didn't come back. We circled the thing once and I felt something wrong settle on my shoulders. Not fear yet, but the rehearsal for it. No windows, no glass darkening, no real seams where a window had been, and no door. "Maybe the entrance is on the downslope side," Caleb said, though he'd already looked. The four of us made a second lap, slower, palms on wood that felt neither alive nor dead. No frame, no hinges. The corner notches were true, old-school saddle joints tight enough that a knife blade couldn't gossip between logs. If a door had ever existed, the wall had healed. "What the hell?" Jared muttered. "Where do they—" He didn't finish because the smell changed. The Swedish high note of fresh ash cut through the juniper, not the dead cold stink of a fire 3 days gone. Today, recent. I pressed my cheek to the wood, cold, but not empty. The way coins are cold, holding the ghost of hands. "Anybody in there?" I called, softer now, embarrassed by my own voice. Nothing. Then something. Not a voice. A sound people make indirectly, like furniture under a person. A drag, slow and patient, like a heavy chair moved a hand's width and then a hand's width more. Heel and toe steps across planks. That's what my mind said. Boot falls. But the rhythm was wrong. Too slow to be a person, too regular to be animal. Old houses shift at night. Anyone from timber country knows that. But this house wasn't shifting. It was practicing. "Don't," Caleb said, and for a second I thought he was scolding me. But his eyes were closed, head tilted, listening with his teeth. "Hear it?" We all did then. A knock. Not a fist. Not knuckles. Something hollow asking another hollow if they fit together. 1. A breath. 2. A longer breath. 3. The pattern meant nothing and still made me want to answer. "Anyone need help?" Tyler asked, because asking is what keeps you human when wood starts acting like a mouth. No reply unless silence counts as conversational, which out here, it does. Dusk came on and fast forward, the cold doing that trick of moving in first at your wrists. "We make camp," Caleb said, and no one argued. 20 yards off, line of sight to the wall that refused to admit a door. Fire, careful and small. The kind of flame hunters make when they want warmth, not notice. Beans and apologies for the beans. Boots unlaced half as a luxury and half as an admission. There was nowhere safe to run in a hurry anyway. We didn't tell stories. People think hunters always tell stories. Mostly we inventory. Hands on gear, eyes on the red seam of coals, counting what we could still claim if the night took an interest. Every now and then, one of us looked up and found another of us already looking at the chimney. Nothing moved. The juniper made old lady sounds. The stars were the particular brutal version you get in air this thin, scorn for city eyes baked right into their glare. Sometime after midnight, the temperature dropped in that exact murderous way our phones insist it won't. The fire sulked. Every exhale made its own tiny cloud. I woke from not sleep because the smell of ash had freshened again, and because the hairs on my forearms had stood without my permission. The chimney was a column now. Quiet, patient smoke climbing into the high dark. No flicker inside the stack, no flame lap. Just breath, if breath burned. I stood without deciding to, the way you stand when somebody knocks, even if you promised yourself you wouldn't be the one to answer. "Don't," Caleb said from his bag, but I was already moving. My light stayed off until the wood was an arm's reach away. I thumbed it on and aimed low, not wanting to give the wall ideas. The beam slid across bark ridges and lichened heaves and landed on a rectangle that hadn't been there at dusk. A door, swollen with weather. Iron handle shot through with a rust the color of old organs. No frame cuts in the log ends, no hinge straps. Just a door-shaped lie in a wall that pretended it never told them. "Caleb," I said. And he was there. 2 steps, then 1. Light shaking because his hand wouldn't be told. Tyler and Jared close behind, breath loud in the quiet. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. A door means invitation, even when it's an insult. Caleb reached. His glove brushed the iron and something breathed on the other side. Hot, damp, too close. Not breath, the steam ghost of breath. And a voice came through the wood, thin as thread. A woman's voice that had to travel a long way through grain to arrive. "Don't open the door." We stood a second, long enough for the voice to become a choice. Behind us, something in the trees knocked once as if to ask whether we'd heard. The door exhaled heat we hadn't earned. The smoke above thickened, and for the first time since we'd found the place, the smell brought a second note with it. That did not belong to pine or juniper or sage, a sweetness that had nothing to do with food. "Back up," I said, but the wall leaned almost imperceptibly toward us as if listening. A chair dragged across a floor we couldn't see. The iron handle warmed through Caleb's glove, and somewhere behind the logs, something smiled in a way that made the skin at the base of my skull decide it was too tight. The knock came again, but not from the wall this time. From behind us, from the dark that has never needed hinges. We turned so fast the fire spat at us. Headlamps slashed juniper into paper cutouts and made our own breath look like steam escaping a valve. Nothing stood in the beam. The forest did its impression of emptiness perfectly, and yet the knock had been close. Close enough that my ribs still remembered its patient rhythm. "Now," Tyler whispered, but he didn't have anything to attach the word to. "Now what, now where? The kind of now that's just a way to organize fear." The chimney exhaled again. We felt the warmth as much as we smelled it. Not friendly heat. The blast you get when a door opens on a room that's been holding something too long, a cellar you weren't supposed to find. I lifted my light back to the wall and the rectangle was still there. Seam rimed with old sap, iron handle dull as a dead eye. If a door can look like it's waiting, this one did. "Anyone inside?" Caleb called softer than last time, like he was ashamed of being a person within earshot of a thing that had learned how to be a room. That same threadbare voice came through as if she'd been standing with her lips against the wood the whole time. It was inside. It isn't anymore, what isn't? Jared asked, because people ask holes if they're wells as if the hole could be blamed for not having water. Silence. Then that scrape again, long and careful. Not panicked moving. Furniture whose job is to be heavy. We go, Tyler tried. More insistence now than whisper. Fire dies. We make for the trucks. He didn't finish. The desert has heard all our tough endings. It has time to be unimpressed. We won't find the trail in this, I said. Though what I meant was, I won't lose Caleb to dark that isn't even honest about being dark. The door answered the argument for us. It shuddered. A breath like a slow bellows pressed against it from the far side. The iron lifted under its own patience and settled back. The wood swelled a fraction, then eased. Please, the voice said. And I realized then it wasn't begging to be let out. It was begging us not to open. Who are you? Caleb asked, his hand still on the handle. The glove had gone slick with sweat and air well below freezing. How long have you been? It moves, she said. When it breathes. When you count. When you think you know where you are. It moves. The cabin. The room, she said. And in that word was a shape I won't give you because I don't want to carry it alone. Back up, Tyler said. And this time I did. A step, then another. The seam of the door shivered. You can feel it when wood decides. It's a softness that has nothing to do with rot. The logs to either side made small creaking concessions like old men saying, fine, have it your way. The handle warmed a degree more, the comfortless degree of skin. Don't open, the voice said again, nowhere near a scream. Just good advice spoken by someone who knows exactly what it costs to be right. And then the chimney changed. Not smoke now, not breath. A dark ribbon like wet fabric unspooled up and away. And with it came a smell I don't have a recipe for. Iron left in rain, a candle snuffed with fingers. The fruit sweet of something that used to be living and believes it could be again if warmth were a verb. Our campfire went flat like someone had clapped a lid over it. Not guttered. Died. 1 second there was flame. The next there was a black circle of ash agreeing with itself. In the same instant the door lost interest in being a door. The seam sealed in a heavy blink. Where iron had been there was only bark. We stared, gaping mammals in a place that had gone back to pretending it was just trees around a pile of stacked logs. I hate this, Jared said, which is both childish and correct. We didn't go back to our bags. We stood where the fire had been and let the cold knead meaning out of the night. Somewhere inside the wall, the chair drew closer to wherever a chair goes when it's trying to be near. Every few minutes the chimney exhaled a ghost. We did not speak and were not spoken to. The desert learned our breath. Just before the sky decided to rinse itself into pale, Caleb moved. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't shout a vow. He just took 2 steps like a man going to the sink in his own kitchen and put his palm flat against the log where the iron had been. Caleb, I said. Not loud, because loud would have admitted something was wrong. We couldn't unfurl. He didn't turn. He leaned a fraction of his weight forward and the wood accepted him. Not a hole. Not an opening. The surface gave as if the grain had remembered a shape and been waiting to wear it again. Don't, Tyler said, lurching, but movement felt expensive and none of us had enough to spend. The cabin inhaled. You could feel it in your teeth. Caleb's hand went into the wrist without the wood parting. The texture of the log smoothed as it swallowed like water hiding a stone. Pull back, I managed. Already knowing you can't tell muscle what it wants more than it wants wanting. Elbow, shoulder. The side of his face brushed bark, and then there was a moment where the whole of him looked like a boy, trying to listen through a wall to sounds he'd been promised. Weren't meant for him. Don't open, the woman's voice said one last time, so close I could hear the chapped crackle of her lips. And then the cabin stopped practicing and did the thing. It took him. No dramatic lurch, no scream. He was there and then ungenerously not there. The log as clean of him as a horizon is clean of memory a second after the sun goes. Where his heat had been, the wood held a cool that felt like refusing. Something knocked from inside once, like a glass set on a table by a hand you trust out of habit. I put both palms to the wall and pushed, not because I thought it would work, but because you have to tell what you love that you tried. The wood did not notice me. Jared made a noise that had too many edges and then turned it into a word that couldn't carry the edges anyway. Tyler walked backward until his boot hit the cold circle where fire had been. We stood in a shape that wasn't a circle or a line or anything geometry would be proud to teach. "Move," Tyler said finally. And that word had a spine. Up and out now. The light was deciding on day with the logic of phenomenon. We packed without packing, hands making the motions without minds signing the paperwork. No one said Caleb's name because names are handles and we didn't know what might grab the other end. We'd made 50 yards when the smell found us ahead. Unmistakable, a rope thrown from a boat that did not exist. On the next shoulder of ridge in a copse we had not seen yesterday, though it must have been there for a century. A roofline hunched, a chimney put its mouth to the morning. The same cabin. No, not the same. The same room, making a new decision about where to be. "Keep moving," Tyler said. And this time his voice had the gravel that happens when a person decides he'd rather be wrong later than right now. We cut a new line across slope, the mountain doing its small joys. Ankles reminded they belonged to the ground, lungs aware of who rents them. Each time we changed direction, the cabin considered us and then appeared where we would have to see it. Without hurry, without glee, smoke a lazy telegram that only said, "Here is where here is now." By the time the sun committed, there was frost in my beard and the taste in my mouth had turned to penny. The room did not tire. It did not chase. It made sure we knew that if we wanted to go somewhere, we would have to go through it. "What if it's not moving?" Jared said, surprisingly calm. "What if we are?" He sounded like a man who had found a way to hurt that he liked better than the hurting he had been doing. We didn't vote. We did what creatures do who have survived long enough to be embarrassed by survival. We pretended there was a plan, and followed it until pretending itself became a kind of plan. On the last shelf before the trucks, the wind changed. Not direction, kind. It came warm from below in a place that had no business remembering warmth. Smoke rose from nowhere visible. The ground under my boots hummed the small hum you hear when a radio is on in another room. Signal without song. And then my phone, which had been off because it is embarrassing to carry a screen into a place like this, woke in my pocket and lit with no battery to justify its courage. The lock screen didn't show the date or the time. It showed a sentence written in a neat small hand that looked like the kind of handwriting grade school used to promise you if you practiced. "Don't open the door." I didn't ask who had written it. There are questions you don't get to keep if you get an answer. We topped the last rise. The trucks were there. Nobody had moved them. The desert isn't a thief. It just reports. We looked back once because we're the kind of animal who does. The chimney put a brief black ribbon into the clear like someone signaling with a handkerchief from a train that never stops. "Go," Tyler said. So we did. And under the tires, as we rolled, the ground knocked once politely, as if to say thanks for the visit. "You know the way now. The door knows you too." In town, the cold changes its accent. The wind doesn't speak desert. It speaks hardware store. You hear delivery trucks instead of ravens. We unloaded ourselves back into our lives with the mindless competence of people who have set down heaviness before and believed themselves safe for doing it. We did not say Caleb's name in the lot. We did not say cabin. We did not say door. We said "I'll text and see you and later." All the sentences that make a room feel like it will keep its shape if you just keep your hands moving. 2 days passed. They did not pass. I poured coffee, typed emails, made eye contact with screens, told the dog he was good. Each ordinary act felt like a bribe I was paying to a clerk I couldn't see. At 3:17 in the morning on the third day, I woke to a warmth against my cheek that had no source in the room. Not heat from a register.
Not fever.
The specific breath warmth that comes from fire held slightly too close. I kept still because still is sometimes the only way to be left alone by something that's already decided to notice you. The warmth receded. A single knock, distant, calm, sounded somewhere under the floor as if the house had grown a basement in its sleep. At dawn, the ranger called my number and asked if I knew a man named Caleb Turner. I didn't ask how he had my number. The mountain knows. The ranger's voice had that soft grief used by men who have to open a file while they speak. We found an old structure blown out in last night's wind. Logs, eastern aspect. No entrance, no way in. We cut it for safety. He didn't finish the sentence for a long time and I did not help him. There were remains, he said finally. Fragments. Not buried like you'd think, pressed like the wood grew around them. Teeth? I asked because I didn't want to. Teeth. A ring. Part of a hand, skin like old rope. He didn't say the fingerprint match. He didn't need to. The mountain isn't bureaucratic. It just waits for our paperwork to catch up with its facts. I went out there alone because people go alone to the place that hurt them when they want to see if the hurt was personal. The ranger flagged the spot with the small, bright tape the living used to remind the dead where to stop. The logs lay open like ribs. The smell was neither fresh nor stale. It was decision. I put my hand to a cut face, palm to the new pale grain. The wood was neither warm nor cold, and yet under skin temperature, under neutrality. Something throbbed slow. Not sap, not life the way we flatter ourselves. A patient store of borrowed breath. On the fourth log in, the cross-section showed what the ranger hadn't wanted to be the one to describe. A dark oval inside a brighter ring. Like a seed you didn't mean to find. The oval had shape. The shape had lines. A whirl where a thumb spent its days being a thumb. Someone had sanded a small patch. The print matched another print a computer far away had decided belonged to my friend. I wanted to put my forehead to the wood to pray, which is embarrassing to say, but true. I didn't. There are prayers you don't bring into an archive that is doing its quiet job. I stood instead, hands foolish and empty, and then the chimney that wasn't there put a shadow into the air. No bricks, no stack, just the absence shape smoke chooses when it remembers what to be. The shadow exhaled once. Somewhere behind my ribs the mirror knock answered. "Don't open," a woman's voice said behind me, soft and almost tender. I turned. No one stood there. The juniper arranged itself as juniper. The rock kept its argument with lichen. I closed my eyes. Behind my eyelids, the room existed the way letters exist after you stop looking at the page. The sentence of it, the grammar, the apostrophes of chair legs, the period of a stove lid. I understood then what the voice had meant when she said it moves. Rooms are not places. They are decisions. We have the courtesy to pretend that decisions are static if enough people agree to sit in them. I drove back to town with the truck heater lying about heat the way it always does. The sky did its sky job. People at the light made face motions that meant go and sorry on my turn. At home, the kettle breathed like something that had spent the night practicing not to. At 3:17, the pipes ticked the polite tick of a house asking if you need anything before it rests. The text thread with the others stayed shallow. As if depth were a lake we could drown each other in simply by tapping enter. Jared sent a photo of a juniper that looked like a man because humans can't help themselves. Tyler wrote, "Ranger says area closed," and I didn't ask if he was relieved. I wrote nothing. I went to the sink and turned on the water and watched it run because running water is one of the small proofs the world still has plumbing wherever the dark. Doesn't night brought the smell before it brought sleep? Not smoke, the after of smoke. On the patio, in the exact corner where wind can't find you unless it knows you by name. A single thin ribbon climbed, then shredded. I put my palm to the door glass. Cold. From the other side, not the outside. The glass fogged where my hand met it, and in that fog a print wrote itself from nowhere. Not mine, not Caleb's, smaller, a woman's, more than one, layered as if prints could harmonize. "Don't open," the voice said again, but it wasn't warning me away from the patio door. It was warning me away from a meaning I had almost chosen because it would have let me go to sleep. I stepped back. I said the sentence I had been pretending was just a sentence. The one the room had taught us because rooms, like stories, love doors more than they love exits. Every road leads back to the fire. I didn't mean a campfire. I meant the breath that holds what happened so it doesn't have to live only in bodies. I meant the archive that the world keeps for us because we are poor librarians when it comes to our own fear. The glass cleared. The ribbon thinned and forgot itself. Somewhere in the wall a chair moved a polite inch. Weeks have a way of teaching you how to be habitable again. I still wake sometimes at the minute that owns its own name. I still feel wood with my palms when I pass certain trees as if checking whether grain recognizes me. I still dream a seam where no seam is. Iron that warms like a hand, a voice saying please to a man who only now understands that please was love, not panic. I have gone back once. I did not tell anyone. The slope was the same shape, which is to say different. The draw had collected a few more stones than last season permits. No cabin, of course no cabin. But in the dust, a print that looked like the underside of a chair leg sat square and sure. 4 small circles where the brads had been, as if a piece of furniture had been set down to rest between breaths. I set my own chair out on the porch some nights. Not as a stunt, not a superstition, but as acknowledgement. I do not sit forever. I do not sit. I give the air a place to remember me that isn't a wall. When warmth comes from nowhere, I don't open. When it leaves, I don't chase. If something knocks from under the world, I touch the wood with my palm and let it feel my shape the way a library book feels the thumb that turns the page. When people ask about Caleb, I say his name. I say it plainly as if names were rope, not bells. If they ask what happened, I don't give them doors. I give them the sentence and let them decide where it goes. Every road leads back to the fire, not to burn, to be kept. You never really notice how still a forest can be until you're trying to sleep inside it. No highways, no clocks. Just that deep hum of air between branches, broken every so often by a leaf giving up, or the dry whisper of something alive moving through brush just out of sight. It was supposed to be my reset. 2 weeks of solo camping before the new job started in Portland. No phone reception, no inbox, no people. Just me, my Nikon, and enough coffee to last until I remembered who I was without a calendar. Opal Creek had been calling me since I was a kid. My dad used to bring me here before the fires, back when the trails still smelled like cedar and wet stone, when the water ran clean enough to make you believe in forgiveness. After he died, I stopped coming. Maybe that's why I chose it now. By the 3rd day, the forest had gone from silence to symphony. The creek gurgled under a canopy of moss-heavy pines, sunlight cutting through in dusty ribbons. Everything felt alive, almost too alive. Even the air seemed to notice me. That morning I wandered off trail looking for a good shot. The light was perfect, golden, low, the kind of light photographers sell their souls for. I found 2 pines that framed the river like a window. I lifted my camera and took 3 shots in quick succession. When I lowered it, I thought I saw movement between the trunks, something pale, probably just the reflection of light off the water, I told myself. Still, I snapped 2 more pictures, zoomed in, and then packed up. The feeling followed me all the way back to camp. The faint, silly certainty that I wasn't alone. That night I made a small fire, boiled water for noodles, and scrolled through the day's shots. The creek, the trail, my boots in the dirt, then those pines. I leaned closer. Between them, dead center of the frame, stood a girl. She was pale, almost colorless, her clothes washed out like a ghost's idea of flannel. She wasn't looking at the camera exactly, more like she was watching something just beside me. Her hair hung straight, damp, face half hidden by strands. I zoomed in further, but the pixels only made her more unreal. My stomach knotted. I flipped to the next shot. She was still there, closer now. Then the next, Closer again, as if she'd taken a single step each time I pressed the shutter. I checked the timestamps. 3 seconds apart. My first thought was that it was some kind of exposure trick, motion blur, something rational. But her face didn't blur. It sharpened, like she was coming into focus, not leaving it. I turned off the camera and told myself to sleep. The forest doesn't care about human shadows, but as I zipped up the tent, I noticed something. 2 dark shapes outside, spaced just like those trees in the photo. And between them, a thin slice of emptiness that felt too deliberate. When the wind moved, I thought I saw her again, pale, standing still, watching. I stayed awake until dawn, camera clutched like a weapon, waiting for the next sound that never came. I told myself the daylight would fix everything. It usually does. Morning light doesn't lie the way night does. It has edges, rules, gravity. But the first thing I saw when I unzipped the tent was a footprint. Small, bare, pressed into the frost right outside the flap. I knelt down and traced it with my fingers. It wasn't fresh. Edges softened, meltwater pooled where the heel should have been. But there were no others. No approach, no exit, just that one print. The trees around the campsite swayed like they were whispering something private. I packed my gear fast, too fast, snapping the lens cap on wrong, burning my tongue on instant coffee. The plan was simple. Hike out early, grab the truck, and convince myself I'd just seen what grief wanted me to see. Still, I couldn't shake the need to look again, to prove something. So before I left, I went back to the pines. The trail was the same, but the air felt heavier. The forest had that after-rain smell, though it hadn't rained. My boots squelched in soil that looked freshly turned, like something underneath had been moving. I found the 2 trees easily. They stood like sentinels over the creek, perfectly still. I raised the camera again. My hand shook, but habit took over. Focus, aperture, shutter. Click, click, click. I lowered it and froze. The girl was standing there, exactly where she had been in the photos, between the pines, facing me. Her skin wasn't just pale. It was gray, like riverstone left too long in shadow. Her eyes were dark, wide, and wrong, not glowing, not supernatural, just old, like they'd been looking far too long. "Hey," I said before I could stop myself. It came out too human, too small. "You okay?" She didn't answer. She didn't move. Her head tilted once, slow, curious, and then she smiled. The creek behind her rippled, though there was no wind. The air shimmered, heatless but bright. For a second, the world looked warped, like I was seeing through glass that remembered fire. Then she was gone. Just gone. No movement, no fade. One blink and the space between the trees was empty again. I took a step back and tripped over a root, nearly falling into the dirt. My pulse hammered in my ears. I checked the camera. The last photo was still there, time-stamped only seconds before. But in the image, the girl was still standing there. Still smiling. Still watching. Only this time she was closer. Too close. Half her face filled the frame. That night I drove into the nearest town, some one-road stop with a diner that smelled like oil and sleep. The waitress noticed my hands shaking. "You okay, honey?" she asked. I told her I was just cold. When I plugged the camera into my laptop, every photo from the trip had been duplicated. Each pair identical except for one difference. In the copies, the girl was always closer. The last image was black. But if I squinted, I could see something faint at the center. Not trees, not the creek. The outline of a tent, mine. I should have stopped there. Thrown the camera in the river, deleted everything, gone home. But that's not how people like me work. We need proof, even when the proof is what ruins us. I went back to Opal Creek. The forest was quieter this time. Too quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the water sounded thin, like it was flowing through a memory instead of stone. The pines stood waiting exactly as before. When I reached the spot, the light changed, dimmer, yellower. I could smell damp hair and river silt, faint and human. My camera turned on by itself, clicking through old images like it was remembering for me. The last picture appeared again. The tent, the smile, that pale half-face. And then the live view opened. The camera pointed not at the trees but at me. I lowered it, heart pounding, and realized something was off. The world through the lens was wrong. The trees leaned at an angle and the light moved like water. But there, between the two pines, stood the girl again, clear and solid, smiling like she'd been waiting for me to catch up. Her lips moved, but the sound came from behind me. You left it open. I turned. Nothing. Just air, just trees. But when I faced forward again, she was gone. Only the space where she had been shimmered. A thin vertical ripple, like heat off asphalt. I don't remember running. Only the sound of my boots striking the earth. The forest bending around me like I was being swallowed. When I finally stumbled onto the road, my camera strap snapped and the Nikon fell, lens first, into gravel. The shutter clicked once more before it died. Later, when I took it to a repair shop, the technician called me outside. He was pale. "Buddy, what kind of filter is this?" he asked, turning the screen toward me. The last image wasn't of the forest. It was me, standing between two pines, staring directly into the camera, and behind me, blurred but visible, was her, hand on my shoulder, smile gone. I left the shop without the camera. That night, as I passed a line of trees near my apartment, two pines stood taller than the rest, framing a small gap of shadow. For a heartbeat, I saw movement between them. A gray flicker, a face I almost recognized. The next morning, there was a photograph on my doorstep, printed on old glossy paper. It showed me asleep in my tent, and between the two pines behind me, the girl, closer than ever. If you've ever been truly lost, you know the moment when the forest stops being a place and becomes a person. It looks back, it edits, it decides what to show you and what to hide, and if you're lucky, it chooses to be merciful. On Mount Ashland, the forest has a reputation for being polite about its lies. The trails are well marked. The maps are accurate. The ski runs sit like tame scars on a friendly face. People don't vanish here. They wander, they get cold, they swear, and then they find the parking lot by the grace of a headlamp or a stranger's voice. That's what we believed when the storm rolled in. It was supposed to be a quick overnight, a late fall loop before the first big snow shut the upper routes. There were 4 of us: me, my wife Lena, my brother-in-law Mark, and his girlfriend, Tasha. We parked under a sky that couldn't make up its mind and started up the switchbacks while the trees rehearsed their winter bones. The air tasted like metal and wet bark. Everyone had opinions about layers and pace. Small talk is how you try to stay bigger than the landscape. We made camp where 2 trails kiss and split, an open patch with just enough windbreak to pretend we understood weather. The stove struggled. The coffee didn't. As dusk scratched at the trunks, we saw it. The low gray belly of a system with ideas. "We'll be fine," Mark said, the way men say it when they are wishing out loud. "If it spits, we bail at dawn, go down the easy way." We ate, told the stories people tell when they're saving the ones that matter, and went to the tents. I woke at 3:17 to a sound that wasn't quite wind. 3 polite knocks somewhere in the trees, spaced like words. I held my breath and it held mine. The air inside our tent had that minute's particular temperature, which is to say it felt like a question. I didn't wake Lena. I lay there and let the knock pass through the skin of the night like something too well behaved to insist. Morning forgot our forecast. The storm came sideways, thick flakes like torn paper, the kind of snow that erases boundaries faster than you can say the word trail. We broke camp fast, our voices jacketed in wool and irritation. The plan was simple: cut down the loop, swing toward the road, follow the tree blazes until the world remembered itself. 30 minutes in, the blazes vanished under a rind of ice. The snow came harder. The forest did its trick. Distance collapsed and expanded in ways that made our legs feel like bad math. Left at the fork, Mark said. But when we got there, the fork wasn't a fork. It was a polite suggestion made by two tracks that both looked used. We picked one. It led us to our own footprints. I don't mean they looked like prints. I mean they were ours. My tread. The worn edge on Lena's left heel. The place where Tasha drags her toe when she's thinking too hard. The deeper marks where Mark shoulders his pack like it owes him an apology. We laughed because laughing pays for minutes you can't afford. We've doubled, I said. Easy fix. We reversed course and took the other option at the next junction. 20 minutes later, there were our prints again. This time they were fresher. Okay, Tasha said, voice steady in that way that means the bottom has dropped out. We slow down. We mark trees. We leave a ribbon. She tore a strip from the inside hem of her jacket, bright red, and tied it to a branch at eye level. We walked. Snow softened, wind argued, then calmed. 5 minutes later, we saw the ribbon again, scarlet against gray, tied in the exact same knot Tasha's hands know. Maybe we're circling tight, Lena said. Maybe it's smaller than it feels. We tried a third path, then a fourth. Each time our prints found us, honest as a mirror. On the fifth attempt, the prints didn't appear until we'd convinced ourselves we'd beaten the trick. The storm light does something to your sense of time. Everything is always noon, which helps you forgive yourself for not noticing the sun move. We rounded a stand of fur, and there they were, clean and brand new, leading toward us with the cheerful obligation of a line on a map. We stop, I said. We think. That's when I saw the place where the snow had been brushed smooth. Not covered, not drifted, brushed. As if a hand had wiped out a set of prints we should have seen. My skin understood before my head did. I knelt. The surface had a shine to it and a dent in the shape of a palm. The dent was small. The kind of small that makes you think child until you remember the forest does not owe you human measurements. We're not alone, I said. Lena crouched beside me. Do you hear that? At first I heard only the old man hush of falling snow. Then I heard the other thing. The faint, distant shushing of branches rubbing above us, except it wasn't from above. It came from ahead. From below, we followed the sound because people follow. The storm slackened long enough to show us a corridor of trees that leaned together like a sentence leaning on itself. At the end of it, a clearing, perfectly round, perfectly wrong. In the center, a blackened ring of stones we hadn't made, and inside that ring, ash in the shape of a circle of chairs. Not wood, not metal, the shape of chairs. Negative furniture burned into snow, arranged with the careful geometry of a memory that wants to teach. Someone was here, Mark said. No, Tasha said, whispering. They are. The storm picked up. Wind smoothed our prints as we stood there, as if the forest were erasing the parts of us it didn't need. And then in the whited-out space between gusts I saw them. Just beyond the clearing, half hidden by the pale, a pattern of dark on dark that looked like people sitting very still. Not silhouettes. The suggestion of them. The way your eye refuses to put faces on mannequins at night. I took a step forward and the figures did not move. I took another and they didn't either exactly, but the world between us shortened. Back, Lena said without breath to spare for pleas. We backed. The forest obliged. The corridor reopened behind us the way a mouth makes a vowel when it decides to be kind. We turned. We walked the way children walk when they think their teacher is looking. Measured, upright, accountable. We came to a fork that had never admitted it was a fork, and both paths were ours, and the ribbon was tied right where we had tied it. And the prints were fresher than time should allow. Stop, I said. Not to them. To the place itself. I set my poles, leaned on them, and tried something I hadn't done since I was a kid, speaking to the ocean. We can't pay for this, I said aloud. We can't afford this loop. The wind stilled. The trees answered with a simple agreement made of wood shifting. I hear you. From somewhere behind us, polite as a neighbor, 3 knocks. We all turned at once. There was no one. There was only the trail deciding it would be kind enough to show its own mouth. We had a choice to make, and the mountain wanted us to believe it was ours. We marked the world like desperate cartographers. Knife scores on bark, red ribbon in threes. A cairn made of stones that felt warm to the glove for reasons I won't ask you to believe. Each sign looked good for a minute, then familiar, then old, then ours in a way that felt like theft. If you've never been returned to your starting point by a place that swears it didn't move, you haven't met the patient face of panic. Shelter, Mark said. We ride it out and wait for a gap. The storm had posture now, shoulders up, a tighter grain of snow that ate distance like a small, pleased animal. The clearing with the chair-shaped ash waited the way an answer waits, but I didn't want to be in the middle of a circle whose geometry had already decided where our bodies would go. We found a shallow swale tucked against a blowdown and made a wall, the kind of hasty nest that has to pretend it's better than nothing. The day held its breath without consent. We ate, which is to say we chewed and swallowed. When you're rationing fear, food is arithmetic. I checked my watch because people check things they can't fix. 3:16. I found I was holding my breath, which is a stupid thing to do unless you're underwater. I exhaled slow, petty, and the second hand clicked to 3:17. Nothing knocked, something breathed. Not wind. Not animal. The sound of a room inhaling. The snow at the edge of our shelter slumped with the kindness of a cushion receiving a weight. Do you feel that? Tasha whispered, and the ground answered by humming very gently like a phone silenced in a pocket. Lena squeezed my arm. We have to keep moving. There is a moment when adults turn into kids without ceremony. That was ours. We packed with exaggerated competence and stepped back onto the loop that wasn't a loop, because loops return you to somewhere. This brought us back to us. If there had been sun, we could have navigated by it. If there had been stars, we might have remembered how our grandparents told time. There was weather. There was the white. There were our voices learning to pronounce calm like a new language. Left, Mark said at a tree I swore we had never met. Right, Tasha said at a stump the color of old pennies, which I had already put my hand on that morning. The corridor found us again, the one where the trunks leaned together like two people sharing a secret. The clearing followed. The chair ash had softened under new fall but held its circle. This time there were footprints in the ring. Not ours, small, bare, close set. They started at the stone ring and walked toward the place where we had been standing an hour ago. Then they stopped. There were no prints returning. We didn't step into the ring. Even exhausted, even angry, we were not that stupid. We skirted it with the kind of care you give a sleeping dog you've never met. At the far side, our ribbon fluttered from a branch at shoulder height. On its red surface were wet finger marks. 4 on one side, a thumb on the other, the way a hand prints when it wants to correct your map. Enough, Lena said, and took my hand. There's a heat that comes off the person you love that weather can't bully. We used it like we had invented it. We turned at a tree that didn't deserve authority and marched until the mountain decided we were boring. The relief was ordinary and therefore suspicious. The storm dropped to a tired sift. The trees opened just enough to hint at road width between trunks. A signpost appeared, half-buried clean wood where no storm should have left clean anything. It said exactly what we needed it to say. Parking. We laughed badly. We moved as if someone were going to change their mind, and we didn't want to be around to argue. 20 steps later, we saw the next sign. Parking. The arrow pointed the same direction. That's fine, Mark said too loudly. 50 steps later, a third sign. Parking. The same handwriting. The same grain. But on the third sign under the arrow, a small neat sentence had been added in blue pen. Every road leads back to the fire. I felt something align under my sternum the way a door aligns when it's about to swing. Do you hear that? Tasha asked. I did. The breaths between our words had gone synchronous. We had become our own metronome, and the mountain was conducting. We followed the arrows because that's what people do when an arrow agrees with their hope. The fourth sign said parking, and under it in that same careful penmanship stay. The fifth said nothing at all, just a clean board pretending it didn't know us. The sixth had no words. It had a handprint, small, bare. The same hand that had pressed the ribbon. The same that had brushed our prints smooth. We stopped. The corridor waited. I could feel the clearing behind us like a polite audience. Snow ticked at the edges of my hood. A branch somewhere let go of what it had been holding, and the small crash sounded exactly like a decision. "We turn around," Lena said. "We've turned around all day," Mark replied. And I couldn't tell if he was pleading with us or the place. "We pick a line and we go." "We already picked a line," I said, surprised to hear my voice make sense. "It's just not ours." No one spoke for a minute that lasted a page. Then Tasha took a red ribbon from her pocket, tied it to her wrist, and held out the tail to each of us in turn. She tied us together not like climbers, but like children in a museum. "If we're going in circles," she said, "we do it as one animal." We moved. The forest approved. The corridor didn't change us. We changed it by not breaking the line of our bodies. The clearing opened like a pupil widening. The chair ash waited. And beyond it, not ghosts, not silhouettes, not suggestions, the figures I had pretended not to see resolving as if focus were just a favor the world can choose to grant. People, not dead, not alive in any way I want for you, sitting, hands on knees, faces quiet in a way that made me think of classrooms and rooms where doctors say the word wait. At their feet, a low, white burning shape that wasn't flame and didn't need smoke to explain itself. A fire that remembered more than it offered. The wind stopped. The storm held its breath. The figures lifted their faces as one to look at us, and in the perfect, terrible quiet, a single knock came from the packed snow under our boots. We looked down. There were no prints around our feet. There were only ours ahead, fresh, inviting, curved back toward the ring. We had been walking behind ourselves all day. There are moments when the world offers a mercy you don't deserve. Ours arrived as a choice that was not a choice. Step into the ring or keep pretending there was a path that wasn't a circle. The body hates honesty more than pain. Mine tried to climb out of itself. Lena's hand on the ribbon shook. Mark's jaw worked like he was chewing glass to pretend it was bread. Tasha bowed her head, not prayer, just listening for instructions that might be kinder than weather. I took one step toward the ring because I needed to test the depth of the lie. The ash did not stir. The chair shapes did not smudge. The people sitting there did not shift to make room. Their faces were easy to look at and impossible to understand. Relaxed, patient, the way you look when you've told your story enough times that the telling does not take anything from you anymore. One of them was Caleb. I didn't know his name then. I know it now. He sat the way a man sits when he's keeping a door. He looked past me, not through me, as if he were watching a hallway in a house I couldn't see. At his feet, the white fire breathed in a slow measure that made my lungs want to obey. It took everything I had not to match it. "Don't sit," Lena whispered. I wanted to tell her I wouldn't. I wanted to promise. My mouth made the shape of the promise and found no sound. That's when the small hand touched my calf. Not a grab. A tap. Polite. The handprint at my ankle warmed through 3 layers of fabric. I looked down. There was no child. There was not even the shape of one. Only the impression of fingers where snow should have been unbroken. 5 ovals clean as punctuation. The ring exhaled. A space opened between 2 of the seated figures. They did not look at it. They did not look at us. They looked at the fire with the affection of custodians. "Every road leads back," Mark said, voice gone hoarse with understanding. "Back to what?" "The fire," Tasha answered, and the word did not feel like heat. It felt like archive. The small hand tapped my ankle again. The ribbon tugged. Lena's grip tightened. We stood there as 4 versions of one animal, trying to decide whether to become a different species. Time is a trick in weather like that. The minute could have been a second or a year. Somewhere in the trees, a branch let go of its burden and the sound gave us permission to breathe. "Listen," I said. "Just listen." We did. The ring hummed. Not music, not words. The sound of stories held at body temperature. The seated people were not prisoners. They were keepers. The loop wasn't a trap. It was a conveyor. It wasn't returning us to our starting point. It was asking whether we intended to carry what we had become, or sit and keep it safe for someone who couldn't. The knock came from beneath our boots again. 3 beats, a pause, the old rhythm. It wasn't asking to be let in. It was asking if we were ready to stop walking behind ourselves. I bent and pressed my palm flat to the snow where the knock had surfaced. It was warm, not melt warm, breath warm. A door's hinge warmed by a hand that has learned how to open gently. My palm fit a depression that had been waiting for a palm. A sentence came up through my bones like a migrating fish finding the place it remembers, without ever having been taught. Say it. I did. I said the line I'd heard before in places that pretended to be unrelated. I said it the way you say your name when the roll call finally gets to you. Every road leads back to the fire. The ring brightened a degree that didn't change the snow and changed everything else. The seated people nodded. Not at me, not at us, but at the fact of the sentence. The loop twitched, not much. Just enough to show us its shape. Our prints ahead of us softened. Our ribbon slackened and then tightened again on our wrists as if a child had tugged it playfully. Now what? Mark asked. And for the first time since the storm began, his voice sounded like a man's and not an argument. Now we choose. Lena said simply. She looked at the space in the ring and then at the corridor that had been pretending to be a path all day. Who sits? Who carries? We stood there with 4 lives we had to count again. The small hand patted my ankle twice more and then went away, as if satisfied it had done its job. Tasha looked at the seated faces and smiled a little, like you do when you see competent people at work. I'll carry, she said. I'm good at stairs. It was a terrible joke. We laughed badly and the ring approved. One of the figures almost smiled with us. The way a teacher approves when you learn play again in a room that had forgotten it. I'll carry, Mark echoed, stubbornness refitted as service. He looked at Caleb. Neither of us knew his name, and nodded with a man's gratitude for someone doing a job you hadn't recognized as a job before now. Lena looked at me. You learn a language with someone that has no dictionary. We spoke it. You carry, she said, and you? I asked, already knowing. I keep, she said. No tears froze. No violins. Just the rightness that comes when the loop reveals that it isn't a circle at all but a spiral. You pass the same tree again, but higher. We untied the ribbon from her wrist and left it on mine and Mark's and Tasha's. She stepped toward the ring. No one reached to take her. The seat opened because she intended it. She sat, hands on knees, face quiet in the new way I didn't have yet. The fire brightened to greet a person who had decided to remember us better than we would remember ourselves. I'll be here, she said, and did not add always because always is a boast. Tell it right, we turned. The corridor did not close this time. It widened as if the forest wanted to show off how decent it could be when you finally spoke its grammar. The storm softened into air with opinions and then into air with patience. We walked without rushing and without stopping, and the world did not fold us back into ourselves. It brought us to the sign that said parking, and this time there was no handwriting under it, no pen's neat insistence. Just wood, just direction, just the kind of arrow your legs love. At the lot there were trucks, there was the tired joy of doors. There was the kind of heat that lies but forgives you for believing it. We looked back only once. The trees were trees. The corridor was a hill with trunks on it. Ajay scolded us for the sin of being mammals. We didn't talk on the drive. We listened to the heater and the way our names sound when the person who says them is the person you lost and found in one day. At 3:17, the clock on the dash rolled past the minute without knocking. The relief made me sadder than fear. It meant the job had moved. Nights are different now. I wake and say the line without waiting to need it. I feel the lift of the hinge in the floorboards when the house turns over in its sleep. Sometimes in a window, I see a person who looks like me lift a hand in a small wave, and I lift mine back before I realize it is just a layer of glass telling me not to forget a language I barely learned. When people ask where Lena is, I tell them, "Not the whole of it, you don't hand strangers the handles." I say, "She stayed up there with the others. She's keeping the door. If you go to Mount Ashland and a storm decides to have you, don't fight for straight lines. Circles aren't traps when they know their own center. If you find the clearing and the chair ash and the people who have learned how to sit without becoming furniture, you will want to be angry. Be grateful instead. They do a job you do not want until you need it. And if a small hand pats your ankle, listen. Tie yourselves together. Decide who keeps and who carries. Say the line even if you don't like sentences that sound like prayers. Every road leads back to the fire, not to burn, to remember. To be remembered when you are busy surviving. Sometimes I dream the ring and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I wake at 3:17 and nothing happens because something already is. Sometimes I hear 3 polite knocks in the pipes and I put my palm to the floor and feel warmth answer. That is enough. That is the loop becoming a bridge. When the first snow of the new year came, I drove up to the lot alone. I didn't hike in. I sat in the truck and watched the edge of the forest breathe and imagined a woman with her hands on her knees, smiling the small smile of someone who knows what to do with a story. I said the line. The heater lied. The clock moved. And in the reflection of the windshield, a second me lifted his hand in that patient wave and then went back to work.